Wrestling with Rosenberg, and what a treat. One of the true greats to ever do it. Jerry the King Lawler is here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you for doing this.
It always feels weird when somebody refers to me as the true great or a legend or that kind of stuff. It's like when Vince McMahon came to me and said, hey, we want to put you in the Hall of Fame. I said, no. I don't want to do it. I always associate the Hall of Fame with like baseball or football Hall of Fame when your career had to be over for a certain amount of years. And I said, I hopefully my career's not over.
I never thought I would in any way relate to that. And believe me, in no way do I fully relate to that. But I've now been on the radio here for, I guess, almost 6 years. And so some of these kids who've been listening to me since they were 12
right.
come up to me when they meet me, and I'm not kidding. They go, "Oh, the living legend." I go, I know how that it feels old.
And what about when they say, "I grew up with you. I grew up listening to you." I go, "Oh man,
I know.
Good.
I am so old." We've heard a lot about you know what happened with you recently in your health scare, and my closest friend in the WWE is Mark Henry, and of course he hasn't been working recently, so I called him. And he hadn't even heard anything yet,
right.
So he was just said, give me a few minutes. I messed him up. I didn't. Yeah. I thought he was going to know something, but he didn't. And then quickly, fortunately, we found out somewhat shortly thereafter that everything was all right, and I could just sense the relief from all the guys, all the boys in the locker room, and from everyone that everything turned out. You must have really felt, as bad as it was, did it help give you a gauge of just how much you mean to the business at this point?
Well, you know what? Not just to the business, but to a lot of people in general. I mean, especially today with social media. I mean, there was such a tremendous outpouring from fans, from friends, from co-workers and that sort of thing. I likened it when I finally came back. It was very similar to the old Christmas movie with the It's a Wonderful Life, where the guy he just was so miserable and he was going to commit suicide, but then he was shown by a guardian angel just how much his life affected so many other people's lives, and it really opened my eyes to that. You just take for granted how many people you touch and how many people you affect with your life, and not just, I mean, that goes for everybody, not just somebody that's on television every week or anything like that. And so in that respect, it was like a gift, really, to feel that and to get to live that, as opposed to how many times do you see a great tribute or some great accolades or something talked about and said to people after they're gone, mm-hmm. and so this was like a chance to get to feel what you meant to people, and then still be around to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you mean so much to the city of Memphis. I'm sure that must have been tremendous. But one thing that I find awesome about you is how much you still love wrestling. You are not just someone, you never mail it in. I was just hearing about a wrestler recently and someone describing that, a lot of times it feels like they're in a different company, but a lot of times it feels like they're mailing it in. And that is not something that would ever really be said about Jerry Lawler. You seem to really love this as much now as you ever did.
Well, I guess... and I appreciate that comment, and I really do. It's a funny thing, I have, and probably you may be the same way with radio, but I've had the opportunity to live and have a wonderful career in what is to me a dream job, and I shouldn't even use the word job, because I mean, I honestly, I have never lost track with the fact that there was a time when I would have paid the promoters to let me wrestle. But instead, I wrestle and get paid, and it's been that way my whole life. It's like, they say you never have to work if you're doing something that you love, and I truly have loved this business, not only as a performer but as a fan beforehand, and I think that's what has, I guess, led to people enjoying what I do as far as the commentary, and the fact that when I get behind the microphone and I'm watching a match, I literally am reverting back to my, not necessarily childhood, but fanhood, and I try to call the match, or I don't even think about the fact that I'm calling a match. I'm literally just it's like I'm talking to a friend of mine or a buddy or all of these friends while I'm watching a match that I'm thoroughly enjoying. So, and I think because of that, I say a lot of the things that maybe the fans are thinking, and that's why they can relate to the commentary that I do.
At what point after you woke up, because I know you didn't remember anything, but once you came to and started realizing it, at what point did Owen Hart cross your mind, and that anything that was happening with you wasn't? And the fact that Bret was on the show that night and all those things, at any point did that experience, because you were such an important part of, in my opinion, there's so many tragedies in wrestling. I don't think there's anything like what happened with Owen and what it was like, not only for his family, but for fans. Right. And you were such an integral part of that, not only telling us, but I know everything about what happened that night and knowing how much you were in the ring literally trying to be there to save Owen.
Yeah, I think that I may have been one of the very few people in that arena, but just because of the circumstances. I mean, they were showing actually an Owen Hart interview on the big Titantron, and JR sitting right next to me. He was looking down at the monitor. Excuse me, and I literally, for some reason, I was looking up at the ring and actually saw Owen come into my view and hit the ring floor, and he brushed and hit the referee as well, and I immediately jumped up, took my headsets off. I nudged JR and I said, I just had to mouth the words because our mics were hot. I said, he fell, and he said, and I said, Owen fell, and I threw the headsets off, and as I went past the timekeeper, I said, tell him in the back that Owen fell, and when I rushed right up to the ring, and he was literally just lying there on his back. And
he wasn't able. There was no communication at that point already. He wasn't.
No, unfortunately. I mean, he died on impact. They said later that it, from falling from that distance, that his heart basically just exploded. And but I actually thought there was some hope, but it was actually his arm, I think, was broken, but his arm was like up.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking. But literally when he had a mask on, and they took the mask off, you could literally see the blood settling, just the color just draining out of his face. And I knew, that was.
How do you then, as someone who, of course, we think of you, it's weird. The relationship with wrestlers is weird because we know you do commentary, but really you're one of the boys, and you're there with these guys all the time. And Owen is such a beloved character. How do you then?
Owen was one of the guys, and I'll a lot of people wonder about this, and they think all these guys are all just big buddies, and that's always not the case. I mean, they're your coworkers, and you are around each other a lot of the time. But I at least personally have had very few close friendships with the other wrestlers. I mean, your close friends are usually somebody outside the business. But I can honestly say that Owen Hart was everybody's friend. I mean, nobody did not love Owen Hart. He was just such a great guy. He was one of the most he was the coolest guy to be around, and that I don't maybe have ever met in this business. And so, yeah, to see that happen to Owen, it was just such a tragic moment, but I don't know if I can't say that it didn't have a major effect on me, because it did. But me being in the business as long as I had my best friend and two other friends, literally my best friend in the world, Sam Bass, who was my manager for years down in Memphis in 1976, killed right in front of me in a car crash, and I literally stood there and watched his car burn up and saw bodies strewn around from that wreck. So I've seen
too much.
Some tragic things over the years, which, so many things go into this business that the people don't, they see us all out there button heads in the ring and everything, but they don't realize all of the travel and just the normal things that happen in people's lives that they don't see, and so it was something that stays with you. But as far as I think your original question was, did that come to mind with me? Honestly, I didn't really think about that. I've tried not to think about the heart attack or I think nobody really wants to contemplate their own mortality. And so I really just didn't think about that. I've thought, hey, I was really fortunate, really lucky, really blessed. and I can't tell you how many prayers. I mean, literally at that particular time, because we were on worldwide live television, millions and millions of people were literally praying for me. And so, something worked. I mean, for some reason, I came back from wherever I was headed. And so I have thought about that, but I haven't really, put it in perspective with other wrestling tragedies,
Speaking of the Harts, what did you have? You've had a long history with the Harts and done a lot with the Hart family. Did you feel any sort of way I think it was 93-ish when you were feuding with Bret and really went after Helen and Stu? Was any of that? Was it obvious? I mean, obviously it was a work, but I mean, still, they were old at this point. You were really going after them.
They were fantastic material, and they were fantastic about it. Stu and Helen Hart. Every time I actually got an opportunity to meet them in person and be around them, they were perfectly cool with everything. Bret, on the other hand, literally, I think really sometimes it might have got under his skin, and understandably so, because I would, I'm still to this day, I'll have people come up and say, "Oh my gosh, my favorite line of all time," when you said Helen Hart produced more tragedies than Shakespeare, or
you had some lines on Helen.
I mean, and so it was great. It was great. It was great for our rivalry then at that point, and it was just some funny, entertaining material. It helped me tremendously to just jump into the WWE and suddenly get involved in a rivalry with the top, Bret the Hitman Hart, who was one of the top guys there.
Yeah,
he wasn't. Bret wasn't crazy about it. I mean, he didn't like me. He didn't like where I had come from, Tennessee, and he wasn't crazy about the positioning of he and I together. So
for where he was, where he felt you were coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you guys end up becoming cool?
We're very cool now. And I actually did some artwork for Bret,
for his book. I know
his book, and then he got married not too awful long ago, and I designed a little a piece of art of him and his wife, and he used it on I think on their stationery and on their cups and everything at the wedding. So,
oh wow!
Yeah, so we're cool now. As a matter of fact, coming up at the Royal Rumble, I'm hosting a panel where I'm going to be between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, talking once again about the Montreal screw job. If anything else can be said about that, we're going to
do another one. If we didn't get it in the double DVD set, we're going to get it.
Right. We were just talking about it.
All right, now I'm going to here's some real inside stuff that you will never remember, but it definitely resonated with me.
Because I can't remember what I had for breakfast or anything before the heart attack.
Especially what I'm about to tell you, yeah. So I bumped into you at the post-WrestleMania party a few years ago, the night you had your match with Michael Cole.
Oh, okay.
And I could tell...
My only WrestleMania appearance ever.
And speaking of which, I could tell just from coming up to you and saying, "Oh, good job," I got a vibe that as thrilled as you were to be included in WrestleMania, obviously someone with the incredible career that you've had, it may have not been your dream match for WrestleMania.
No, it was, you're right, it was not my dream match. But in the sense, I've had so many of those kind of matches. I mean, one of my biggest matches ever in the history of my career was a similar type match against Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, a non-wrestler.
A non-wrestler, yeah. And trust me, with Jimmy Hart and Paul Heyman starting out and Jimmy Cornette and so many guys, the manager type guys and people that were non-wrestlers, I've had tons of those matches and they've been good. Unfortunately, I just didn't I wasn't really pleased with the way the match was laid out. I would have loved to have laid the match out myself, and I think it would have been much more entertaining. And and certainly, I thought that the reversal of the decision was I don't know, especially with Stone Cold Steve Austin being involved and everything. But hey, it was it was my WrestleMania moment, and
I think there could still be another one.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe that won't be my last one. But
well, I have to tell you, I thought with the way things were going that, and people disagree with me on this, but I felt at that point, I believe it was Swagger you were having matches with at that point,
yes.
And I felt that those matches were getting so good, and Cole was, to his credit, doing such a great job getting heat for the whole situation.
Exactly.
That I would have been into you and Swagger having your own match at WrestleMania. I thought you were totally still plausible as an opponent for Jack Swagger, and I think it would help both of you.
I think so. But what made what made the match with Michael and I think even get put on WrestleMania, and to be what it was at that particular time, was that it was a personal issue. It became personal to the fans when Michael talked about my mom, who had just recently passed away.
Yes,
and that hit home to everybody. It was like my me back on September 10th. I mean, when somebody dies, excuse me, that's my only still lingering thing about the heart attack is this raspy voice from where they put the ventilator in there. And I'm not saying cut me off, please, but it just
every once in a while the talking gets.
Yeah, it's just and I went to an ear, nose, and throat specialist, and they said anytime they put that trauma from that ventilator, and they said sometimes it take 6 or 8 months for that to clear completely up, and that's obviously what's happening with me. But yeah, the situation with my mom and we had so many people say, "Oh my gosh, are you cool with that?" Or "How can you let him talk about the actual death of and the passing away of your mother?" And it was like we made sure that he never said anything derogatory
about your mother.
About my mother, absolutely.
Right.
It was always about me, and just the fact that I think the the worst thing they ever said is weren't you embarrassed with what happened to you with knowing that your mom's up there watching and I mean it was just the fact that he brought that to light, and the personal issue between he and I just developed. And I mean, they actually took a poll one time before WrestleMania in the WWE headquarters, and asking the workers, what match are you most interested to see at WrestleMania? And Cole and I were right at the top.
I'll be honest, that was high on the list of what I was geared up to see, because I thought I watched in person and on TV Cole get heat, and even though there were things about it that drove me crazy, the heat was real. I mean, there was real hatred there. Real quick, can you just put this to bed? People were upset about Paul E. Faking the heart attack, and during your days, I'm sure you saw much worse than that, and I'm sure that did not bother you. But I'm curious to hear you speak on that.
Yeah, it did not bother me. You're right. I've seen and done much worse in the past in my career, and nobody. But the thing about that, nobody told me that was going to happen. I mean, it was just like, as a matter of fact, as I was going out to start the show, and I saw Paul Heyman over in the corner, and he just looked over at me and he said, "This is going to be stiff tonight. I hope you're okay with it." And I didn't even know what he was talking about, but and a lot of people were upset, and I think, of course, Paul and CM Punk, they're going out there intentionally trying to get the heat, trying to make people as ticked off as they could at him. To me. And everybody says, and the phrase "making fun of your heart attack," and that's all well and good. That's something somebody with no class would do, and that's Paul Heyman and CM Punk,
of course.
But to me, it would have been better, and if the shoe had been on the other foot, I would have played it for a little more comedy and making fun of what happened to me. And the fact I would have done the Fred Sanford type heart attack, "Oh, Elizabeth, here's the king having the big one," that sort of thing. I think the way they did it, trying to make it realistic, it crossed the line of being crossed the line a little bit of those guys being entertaining and making fun as to being offensive and offending
for other people,
for the fans. Yeah,
right. And that's the problem, is you want to get them angry.
Yeah,
but since they took it personally,
you don't want them to be offended.
Right.
And I think I think that crossed not far. And I think Paul Heyman did a great job of explaining it the following week when he said, "Hey, you know what? You people always say you want extreme. You people always say you want the attitude era. We give you a little attitude, we give you a little extreme, and everybody gets upset." And that was true. That's exactly what happened.
Now, listen, I know this is going to have to be, because we have to wrap up here. This is just part one. I'm going to have you back again, because we didn't touch Memphis at all, and there's so much to talk about. I mean, I could do 30 of these with you. Since we kept it sort of in the recent era and the more mainstream questions, last thing I'll ask you before you go. One of the amazing things about what you did with Andy Kaufman is it took the one thing that everyone does is poke fun at wrestling for being silly. That's like the mainstream thing to do is, but then at the same time, the people who say that, it's almost like they're bitter because they actually got worked when Andy Kaufman happened. And they were so shocked that it was a work when the movie came out. But then you take it a step further, in my eyes, and seemingly get into it with Jim Carrey. So that's the ultimate question. Was the Jim Carrey thing a work, or were you and Jim Carrey did you guys really have issues with each other?
Yeah, there were real issues with Jim Carrey.
That was not, you're not working me still to this day.
I'm not still working you still to this day. However, I just... a couple of weeks ago, out of the clear blue, I get a call, and I haven't heard from Jim Carrey since we did the movie. And what was that, in 2000?
98 or 99.
99 or something like that. I haven't heard from him since, except that he did make for a few months after that, he made prank phone calls to my house in the middle of the night.
No.
Yes, honest to God. I mean, I answered.
And you know it was him.
Of course. I mean, Bob Zamuda told me later that was him. I mean, but I answered the phone, and it's him doing Andy Kaufman. And he's called. He did it about 4 times, but that was like I said, a few months after the movie was over. I hadn't heard from him since, other than a couple of weeks ago, out of the blue, I get a call from his secretary, saying Jim's got something he wants to send you, and we're just looking to get your right address. So I give him my address, and I said, "What does Jim Carrey want to send me?" She said, "Well, I can't tell you. He won't let me tell you, but just look for it in the mail." So a few days later, I get this package, and it's from Jim Carrey with a little letter inside. And the funny thing was, apparently somebody had given him the outfit, the robe that I wore in the movie during our match. The outfit had given it to Jim Carrey recently, and it just looked like from the letter he thought it was from me, and because it just started out, says, "Dear Jerry." The gift of the outfit that you wore in the filming of Man on the Moon was possibly one of the greatest things I've ever received. And he said, I'll treasure it always. And he said, I just wanted to reciprocate by sending you. And he said, working with you was both an odyssey and I don't know, it's one of the thrills of, he's this letter, but like one of the thrills of his life. And he said, I know that you dabble in music, and I just wanted to send you something from my personal collection. And there were like 8 mint condition vinyl record albums, all done by different wrestlers, even back to, and one of them was by Antonio Rocco or something, the barefoot wrestling guy from years ago. The WWE album, the Hulk Hogan album was in there. Albums by Sweet Daddy Siki, and like 8 vinyl albums that were all wrapped in plastic and mint condition.
Wow, and I know you're a big...
Sent it to me out of the blue,
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, but during the filming of the movie, he was so in character and so, I guess, I don't know if it's method acting or whatever, he was trying to channel Andy Kaufman, it seemed, to everybody. And he was just a big jerk. I mean, even Milos Forman. I mean, he's Milos Forman, one of the most famous directors of all time. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Amadeus, and all this. Even he had it up to here with Jim Carrey. I mean, because you couldn't even refer to him as Jim. He came to the set every day, already in character, already in makeup, and you had to talk to him as Andy. You had to call him Andy.
And that must be weird for you, who was actually close with Andy.
Yeah, because Jim was not even close to Andy's real personality. I asked Milos Forman at one point. I said, "Has he read the entire script? Does he not realize that Andy and I were really friends?" Because I mean,
but in the movie, I think it did end up coming across. You did feel
finally, yeah.
The way it's edited, at least, you end up feeling it, and I think it ends up coming off pretty good.
Right, in the movie. But when we were filming the movie, at the first part, I mean, he was like, he was trying to make everybody believe, and I think maybe himself believe, that we were like mortal enemies. I mean, he just did all sorts of stuff to really tick me off, and then finally. I think what his ultimate goal was, that he so wanted to relive what Andy lived in that time frame, was he wanted me to actually give him a pile driver, and I think in his mind what he was going to do was, whether he was hurt or not, he was going to go to the hospital. He was determined to do everything that Andy really
and sell
did.
it the same way.
And sell it the same way. And then the day we were filming the pile drive scenes in the match and everything. Of course, they had a stunt double for Andy, and literally like the week before that, they called me in the middle of once again in the middle of the night, because I guess in California it was 2-hour time difference, and it was just kind of late out there, but it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. I get a telephone call, and it's Jim Carrey, it's Danny DeVito, and then a couple of more Universal, maybe an attorney or somebody, are all on a conference call, and they're saying, Jerry, we got a question. We really need to know. Could you give Jim the pile driver, and he for sure not be hurt? And I said, well, I've never really hurt anybody. I've probably given 1,000 of them, and I don't think I've ever really hurt anybody or damaged their. Certainly not broken anybody's neck or anything like that. I think that's a possibility, but I can't guarantee. I'm not going to sign it in blood or anything. And so the deal was Jim wanted to take the pile driver, but then when we got out and actually started filming, apparently the lawyers and the insurance people had said, no, he can't do it. Got to use a stunt double. So we started filming the scenes, and I know it was embarrassing because they filmed it in this Olympic auditorium with like thousands of fans, actually, extras in there as fans. And when we would do the scene, we'd do the deal where Jim Carrey would come over, and I would like kick him in the stomach, bend him over, stick his head between my legs, grab his around the waist, pick him up, have him sitting up in the air, and the director would yell, cut, and I'd gingerly set him down, and then the stunt double would walk in and get him in the same position as the action, boom, and I'd give that guy the pile driver, right? And we must have done this 6 or 7 straight times to try to get this, the takes just exactly right. And so finally we're getting ready, and Milos Forman comes around and says, I know this is taking a long time, ladies and gentlemen, but this is the last take. One more time. This is going to be it. This is going to be a wrap. Everybody's going to be able to go home. And one more pile driver. And so as Milos walks away, Bob Zamuda, who was actually Andy's friend
and writing partner
and everything, he was over there in the corner with Jim Carrey. And he comes walking over. Carrey wouldn't even come around me. So all of a sudden, Bob Zamuda comes walking over to my corner, and he just kind of passes in front of me, and he says, hey, Jerry, Jim says that when the director yells cut on this time, when you get him up in the air for the pile driver, even though the director yells cut, he said, go ahead and give him the pile driver. He said, then it'll be on film. There'll be nothing they can do about it. And he just turns around and walks away. And I look over across and I look at Carrey, and he's just looking at me, and he's like giving me, yeah, that's what I want. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I know what he's going to do. He's going to
sell it.
He's going to sell it. He's going to want to go to the hospital. Everybody's going to be looking at me like, what the crap did you just do to our big superstar here and everything, who's, and he had already, one of the coolest things, I'll never forget about this, one day during the, when we were just sort of getting ready for a scene, Jim Carrey comes over to me, and he says, I'm going to make a face, and you tell me if you can tell who it is. And suddenly, that rubbery face of his, all of a sudden he gets this big, evil-looking grin. And I said, the Grinch. And he said, yes. And nobody even knew, but he was about to start doing the Grinch movie, right? And so, anyway, I'm just thinking in my mind, he's going to go to the hospital. He's going to shut down production here and all of this kind of stuff, and just to relive what Andy did. So he said, everybody get ready in your places. And so about that time, Milos is walking by again. He's going back to get behind the camera and everything. And I kneeled down and I said, Milos. And he said, yes, Jerry. And I said, they just came over here and told me to go ahead and pile drive Jim. When I was on the spot, but I didn't
know what to do.
Yeah, so I said, they just want me to go ahead and give Jim the pile drive. I just want to let you know what's going to happen. He goes, oh, Jerry, thank you so much for telling me. He turns around and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap. We're through. We got everything we need. Thank you all for coming here. Thank you very much. And all the extras stood up and started leaving and everything. And I looked across, and Jim Carrey was hot. I mean, he was incensed. He runs over to the middle, and he grabs the microphone that was feeding the house, that the announcer had been using. And apparently some people had been saying that he was, come on, what are you, a coward? Take a pile driver, Carrey, some of the extras and stuff. So he said, let me tell you people one thing. I wanted to take a pile driver, Jerry Lawler. And about that time, I guess they just thought, what's he doing? And they cut his microphone off. And all of a sudden, he's just mouthing in the middle of the ring, yelling. Nobody could hear what he said. And so he looks around, he realizes the mic's off, and he says, I have performed on Broadway, and I do not need a microphone to be heard. I want to tell you something. And so then Milos tugs on my leg, and he says, just come on, get out of the ring. So I start to get out of the ring, and he sees me starting to leave, and he runs over, and I stand there looking, and we're 1 foot apart, and I think I don't even know what it was going through his mind right then, but he just looks at me, and he just suddenly spit right in my face, just like a big loogie, pound right in my face. And I just went, what the hell, what is he doing? But I kind of lost it for a second. And when he did that, his eyes got real big, and it's like he always does that. Oh my God, what did I just do? And he turns around and starts to run to leave. And I just ran after him. Some referee guy got between us, and I went throwing this guy. And he said, I threw him. Later he told me, he said, you threw me out of my shoes. He said, you threw me so hard my shoes came off. And so anyway, I ran across, and I grabbed Carrey. He was trying to get out of the ring. And I grabbed him from behind in like a reverse chin lock. And he had this big, huge bodyguard. This guy must have weighed 400 pounds, like 6'7". And he saw what was going on. And the funniest thing, he grabs Carrey by his ankles, and he's trying to pull him out of the ring. And I got him inside by his neck, and I'm pulling him back into the ring. And it was like we had him on a rack, and he was just stretching this guy. And this lasted maybe 10 seconds. And I came to my senses, and I said, I can't beat up Jim Carrey here on the set of this thing. So I let him go, and he goes to the guy, yanks him out, and he plops out onto the floor. And so then they get me out of there, and I didn't hear any more until like that night at about 10 o'clock. And there was a huge hurricane going on the East Coast. Homes are being destroyed and everything. And suddenly the breaking news bulletin on every station in Los Angeles, everywhere out on the West Coast was, actor Jim Carrey injured on the set of Man on the Moon by professional wrestler Jerry Lawler, and all of a sudden there's film of it, and he's gone to the hospital. He's in traction.
So he still managed to do it.
He still managed to do it, and he possibly worked me into doing it. Yeah, and of course he did the neck brace thing, and he went a little further. He had me fired off of the movie, and the word I heard was that I went back home to Memphis, and that they were going to reshoot all of my scenes with somebody else, and that he was never going to work with me.
He was continuing to work. He was,
obviously, yeah.
Wow.
Because then the next thing I know, I got a call and said, "Would you come to New York, and we're going to film the Letterman stuff."
Well, listen, next time we talk Memphis and so much more. What a pleasure. Okay. So glad you're doing well, Jerry.
Thank you, my friend.
Jerry the King Lawler.
Thank you.